Thanks, Councillor Jones. There's no applications for leaves of absence, so we'll skip over item 202 of 21. And that brings us to item 203 of 2021, declarations of interest. And viewers will perhaps note that we normally have dealt with declarations of interest throughout the meeting as we come across a particular agenda item where a councillor has a declaration to make. But we've decided to initiate a new practice where all such declarations are indicated at the beginning of the meeting as well as immediately prior to the moving of any particular agenda item. So I'll invite all councillors to declare any conflicts of interest for items on this agenda. I think Councillor Diffie, you have one, is that correct?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I've actually got two. I'm declaring a pecuniary interest in item number CCL 21/218. My husband Angus Diffie is employed by Tom and Kath Harvey, and so I will be leaving the room on this matter. And the second item is a matter within the Committee of the Whole, and I will be declaring a non-pecuniary significant interest in that matter as it is relating to state government and I work for the local member.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Diffie. And Councillor Moore, I think you may have one, is that correct?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've got two, and the first one is in CCL 21/215, which is a non-pecuniary significant declaration. I wish to declare a non-pecuniary significant interest in this matter as I've been advised by my legal representatives that due to me reporting significant issues in regards to the process and handling of this report to ICAC, I should no further have any input. And the next one is CCL waiting for it to come up. CCL 21/220, and this is a non-pecuniary less than significant interest. It's in regards to my residence is located across the road from the proposed closure of Ganoo Street. That's my declarations.
Any other declarations of interest, councillors? No, thank you. We'll move then on to the forum, item 204. And I'll call on the Executive Manager of Governance and Internal Control to read out what I think are two public forum submissions.
Public submission 1 from Margaret McDonald. Agenda item CCL 21/208, Tree Preservation Order. Members of Dubbo Environment Group have only recently become aware that our local council does not have a tree preservation policy which protects trees from destruction or lopping on private and public land. Until approximately 1995, Dubbo City Council did have such a policy, but it was ditched for a significant tree register instead. To our knowledge, this register is extremely limited and only contains trees which have been assessed by council staff upon citizen request. Many residents have expressed dismay at the random demolition of urban trees in the last decade. Some of these grand old trees have graced our streets for hundreds of years. We have despaired for the wildlife and biodiversity, which has been shabbily overlooked, often in the interest of infrastructure and business. We have experienced genuine grief and a sense of abandonment as citizens who care about their environment. Ratepayers would like council to consider everyone's needs as a matter of moral and ethical fairness. We know that Dubbo has been assessed by ANU scientists as one of 5 Australian electorates set to experience the most extreme future climate change consequences of higher temperatures and droughts. As much as 70% of all carbon stored in a tree is captured in the last half of its life. For every large tree we cut down, thousands need to be planted in its place to have the same carbon storage value in the next few decades. Researchers from the University of Western Australia say there is evidence that extensive clearing of the southwest's native forests cleared in the 1960s to 1980s caused a 16% reduction in rainfall. The University of Wisconsin in 2019 reported that urban tree planting can bring down temperatures by as much as 5 degrees even in the hottest cities. Trees not only deliver shade, they transpire, providing a second outdoor air conditioning mechanism. The following regional New South Wales councils have tree preservation orders protecting their tree canopy on both public and private property, with specifications for height and canopy requirements. Albury Regional Council, Armidale Regional Council, Blue Mountain City Council, Orange City Council, Wagga Wagga Regional Council. We commend Councillor John Ryan for his efforts to initiate a return to what we consider is of paramount importance. We ask for the support of all councillors in assessing the value of a strong pre-preservation policy for the Dubbo region. We submit that the holistic cost of cutting down a tree should be balanced by the financial cost of planting a tree in this appraisal. Public Submission 2 by Richard Mutton. Mr Mayor and Councillors, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to address you. I have a concern about a comment made by Councillor Greg Moore regarding the purchase of the Carpet Court building. May I digress and say that this was a wise and necessary purchase by Council for the future of Dubbo. Councillor Moore suggests that this purchase become a car park. To me, I could not think of anything worse for this area. As a former councillor, Dubbo City Council had a plan not only to purchase the Carpet Court building, but also purchase the buildings facing Talbragar Street and to convert the whole area into a totally fully contained council complex containing the library, an outdoor area for relaxation and a memorial wall to house the names of the Dubbo citizens who have contributed to the city in some way. While this overall plan may be too much for council to afford short term, it needs to be looked at and considered, at least for a new library, much better than a car park. The library at its present site is not fully functional internally or externally. Parking is a problem, part of the building is flood prone, and the internal fixtures do not represent what a modern library should be offering its citizens. As I have stated to you in the past, the library, despite its faults, has a wide usage throughout the community. Over 50% of ratepayers use it in some form. The Carpet Court building site must, I believe, in any planning, be considered for a new library. I want to recommend to all of you the new library in Marrickville in Sydney as a starting point to consider future planning for a library. You can go to their website and look at how they have converted an old hospital into a modern library. The past Dubbo City Council did much the same thing with the old high school to become the cultural centre. The same thing could be done for a new library. While the Carpet Court building may not be easy or viable to be converted, the site, however, is ideal. It is next to the theatre, close to admin and the chambers, and has adequate parking within walking distance of 3 roads and an existing car park. The Marrickville Library contains a small theatrette, coffee shop, indoor and outdoor quiet reading areas, child reading area with shelves and a stage at child's height, well-designed computer facilities and meeting rooms, and a very well-organised reception area. The Marrickville Library also offers low-cost accommodation, again something this council could offer. I urge all councillors and those who are listening to this as potential councillors to consider a new library on this site. Have a look at Marrickville, a very exciting concept. Dubbo Regional Council need to investigate the possibility of a new library and to plan to put it on the Carpet Court site or nearby. A shovel-ready plan will always attract some form of grant money from state and federal governments, plus some of our rate money should find its way into the mix over time. By all means, use the land for a car park if the current building needs demolition, but don't make it permanent. Past councils and councillors used imagination, foresight and initiative for the regional theatre, the cultural centre, Apex Oval and Barton Park. It can be done again. I urge councillors to bite the bullet yet again and plan for another landmark building for Dubbo. Thank you for listening. That's it.
Thanks, Ms. Rouse, and I thank the authors of those 2 thoughtful submissions. That brings us to item 205, confirmation of minutes, the first substantive item of business. Can I have someone confirm that move that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of 23 August this year and 6 September 2021? Thanks, Councillor Jones, and seconded by Councillor Parker. Thank you. Any questions or debate, councillors? I'll put that then. All those in favour and against? I declare it carried. That brings us to item 206, mayoral minutes for September 2021. I move that. Can I please have a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any questions or debate, councillors? I don't propose to speak to it. No. All those in favour? Against? I declare it carried. That brings us to item 26A, acknowledgement of Assistant Commissioner Jeff McKechnie, APM, New South Wales Police Commander of the Western Region, retired of the New South Wales Police Force and his service to the Dubbo local government area. I move that mayoral minute to acknowledge the now retired Assistant Commissioner. Can I please have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Jones. I'll speak to that, councillors. On behalf of Dubbo Regional Council, I wish to acknowledge the service of Assistant Commissioner Jeff McKechnie, APM, Commander, now retired, of the Western Region, New South Wales. I want to acknowledge his services to communities, particularly in the Dubbo local government area. The now retired Assistant Commissioner completed his last day as Commander of the Western Region on 23 September 2021 following his retirement. Jeff dedicated 33 years to serving the community as part of the police force in protecting the people of New South Wales and in particular rural communities. He was a passionate leader in the police force who embedded himself in the various communities that he served. Jeff started and ended his career in rural New South Wales, and one of his proudest achievements was the establishment of a world-class rural crime investigation team. He was instrumental in the formation of the Rural Crime Prevention Team and the expansion of rural crime investigation capabilities. This team now works across all of regional and remote New South Wales and are dedicated to preventing and responding to rural crime. Jeff returned to Dubbo in 2012 when he was promoted to Assistant Commissioner as Western Region Commander in 2012. During this time, he led the restructuring of 11 local area commands into 7 police districts with an officer in charge model implemented, where each regional police station had a senior officer in charge of operations to work closely with and be part of the community. Jeff has also been the Region Emergency Operation Controller for the Western Region for the past 10 years, where he was responsible for the emergency management of a very significant majority of the landmass of New South Wales. In August 2021, as RECON, as the acronym goes, he enacted the Regional Emergency Operational Centre in direct response to the Delta strain of COVID-19 hitting Western New South Wales. And it was in that capacity that I've had quite a bit to do with him in the last month or so, as has the CEO. Jeff's role also means he's the lead, or was the lead, as the RECON for the Western Far West and New England emergency management zones. Jeff has been instrumental in the emergency management response to the Wilcannia community, in particular bringing in the New South Wales RFS Emergency Operations Centre to town, working closely with the ADF to deploy personnel across his region, including Dubbo, Wilcannia and Burke. As RECON, Jeff has implemented the Western Far West vaccination team within the Emergency Operations Centre, which comprised New South Wales Health, New South Wales Police Force, the ADF, Commonwealth Health, AUSMAT, the RFS, Aboriginal Affairs, Transport for New South Wales and Resilience New South Wales. Now, this team, under the leadership of Jeff, has been responsible for vaccinating some of our most vulnerable communities and delivering the high vaccination rates that we now enjoy across Western New South Wales. I wish to offer my sincere thanks to Jeff for his exemplary service. The quality of his service is reflected in how highly regarded and popular he is across the community. I want to thank him for his most recent involvement in the COVID emergency, his innovative ideas and efforts in working with communities around New South Wales, and particularly with the rural communities of the Dubbo Regional Council area. Jeff has very much been a man of the law and a man of the police, but he has always, in all my dealings with him, indeed demonstrated a lot of compassion and thought for everyone across the community, including those people that he has policed. And that, again, is no doubt why he is such a popular person across the Western region. Any further questions, more debate or discussions, councillors? Thanks, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo your sentiments. It's very difficult for somebody who attains such a high rank to not only have the respect of the high echelons of the police force, but also the rank and file. And I will note that when there was a bit of a disturbance and some police were outnumbered and in trouble during the council pre-poll, that Jeff McKechnie must have heard it on the radio, and he pulled up in the middle of Macquarie Street and bolted in to help his troops. and you don't often see that from such a high-ranking officer. So, yeah, I'd just like to add from myself all the best in retirement.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any other questions or debate, councillors? Thanks, Councillor Diffie.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank Jeff for his service to Police Force as a whole, but to Dubbo in particular, and congratulate him on his retirement and wish him all the best.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. Any other questions or debate, councillors? No? Okay, then I'll put that. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to item 207, report of the Development and Environment Committee meeting of 13 September 2021. Can I please have someone move that the minutes be noted? Thanks, Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Etheridge. Any questions or debate, councillors? Councillor Parker?
Yeah, look, through you, Mr. Mayor, a question of actually two questions to the director. Look, the month of August was another successful month for development DA approvals. 56 for 19 million, as against 12 million the previous year, 2020. But in the report, there are a couple of items that of interest. One, educational building for 4.8 million. And I guess that's one that probably the Liberals already reported on in terms of the Rural Fire Service training. If it's not, please let me know. But the other one of interest was the medium density, 1 to 2 stories, one application or one approval for 5.1 million. So just wondering what that one is. And the second question was just if we could have a bit of an update as to the vacant land, what might be available for land building in the within the next 3 months, if he has any knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Parker, for the question. Yeah, you're correct that the educational building at the airport, which is 3 Walters Way, is the Rural Fire Service training facility and accommodation building. So that's worth $4.8 million. The second one you inquired about is at 33 Waterway Crescent, and that is a multi-dwelling residential development, 22 units comprised of 1 and 2 story, as you said, and it involves a community title subdivision as well. And that's based in South Lakes. And the other question you had in relation to residential land, look, for the next 3 months, I have projected, it's a bit hard to project for 3 months. So what we've got is an 11-year projection, because essentially council aren't restricting the development of land for the next 3 months or for the next in excess of 11 years. So based on available land that's zoned appropriately residential.
I think we might have just lost Mr. Wallace there. He's certainly frozen on my screen. Are other people experiencing that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
We might just wait 20 seconds or so, and if Mr. Wallace doesn't reappear, I might adjourn the meeting briefly. We can get him back on the screen.
Sorry, have you got me back?
Yeah, we do. We can't see you, but we can hear you, Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, I apologise for that. That doesn't often happen. Bad timing. So I might jump to the crunch, but basically we've got in excess of 11-year supply. That's 340 hectares of land, which equates to around about, once you take out the servicing of those lots, it's about 3,400 lots. So there's a substantial amount there ready for the developers to get involved in.
Thanks, Mr. Wallace. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Parker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to item 208, the report of the Culture, Economy and Corporate Committee meeting of 13 September 2021. Can I please have someone move that the minutes be noted? Thanks, Councillor Diffie. And have we got a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. Any questions or debate, councillors? All those in favour? Against? I declare it carried. That, councillors, brings us to the first of the notices of motion, item 209, tree preservation order. Councillor Ryan, would you like to move your notice of motion on tree preservation order?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Have you got a seconder for that motion? Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, look, would have technical difficulties. I won't. I'll make it very brief. I've been approached by a number of members of the community who think we should, Dubbo Regional Council should be moving towards a tree preservation order. I just think it's important that that we get as much information as we can, and we just work it from there. Thank you.
Any other questions or debate, councillors? No? I'll put that then. All those in favour? And against? I declare it carried. That brings us to Councillor Diffie's notice of motion 210 concerned with the Victoria Park Playground redevelopment. Councillor Diffie, would you like to move your notice of motion on Victoria Park Playground redevelopment?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to move the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. Have we got a seconder for that notice of motion? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Diffie?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will speak to it briefly. Look, for me, this is what we can always do better in understanding what community values and you know, in community spaces, and also do better at creating a deeper community reasoning behind council decisions. So, you know, Libby's Place has been a special place for a lot of people. For me, as a mother of 3 children, Libby's Place was always the ideal park to take the girls to. Our eldest daughter Claire had special needs, and Libby's Place allowed me to take all 3 girls to a play space where I knew that if something happened with Claire, our younger girls couldn't escape me. So it always provided a space that was fun and inclusive, and I could use the equipment for essential therapy for Claire while still being fun for all 3 girls. So I think it's important that we take this space back out to the community for community consultation and endeavour to get a real grasp on what the community values in the community play spaces as well.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. I think I can just hear some background noise, so maybe if we can just all make sure that we're muted. And Councillor Ryan, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, look, I couldn't support this motion enough. I have received in the last few weeks an enormous amount of community consultation on my telephone, and everyone wants to have a say. So many people just can go there and relax and know that their kids are going to be safe. I think the fence is vital. I think the community's spoken on it. As Councillor Diffie said, if you can do a lot of things in one place and provide the therapy, provide that quality of access for the people who struggle the most to find it in every sphere of life, I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's great that we're going to have consultation, and I urge the community to take advantage of it. And you can stop ringing me. You can put your consultation in. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any other questions or debate, councillors? I'll just speak to it briefly. Yeah, look, I strongly support Councillor Diffie's notice of motion, and I've been involved in a number of conversations on this topic as well with community members, a number of them on social media. And yeah, detecting a strong groundswell of support for having a fence around the playground facilities there, and also for particular types of play equipment that have been provided and in some cases haven't been provided in the past in Libby's Place for those to be provided in the new space. So certainly important, I think, to open community consultation on it and to gauge community views. And as Councillor Diffie said, to make sure that the implementation of this project matches the values of the community. Any other questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against? I declare it carried. That brings us to item 211, cost of running aquatic leisure facilities. Councillor Ryan, would you like to move your notice of motion on costs of running aquatic leisure facilities?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Have we got a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Diffie. And Councillor Ryan, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Mr Mayor, I believe Grant would like to propose an amendment.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Grant, you've got an amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So thank you, Councillor Ryan. Yeah, Mr Mayor, look, it's just a very slight variation on what Councillor Ryan has put up, but so point 1 will stay the same, but point 2, it will be that the report details the costs of the Dubbo, Wellington and Geary facilities independently of each other.
Thanks, Councillor Grant. We've got a seconder for Councillor Grant's amendment. Thanks, Councillor Jones. Questions or debate on the amendments? On the amendment, I should say. Thanks, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just quickly speak to it. So, and look, I totally agree with the motion that the recommendation that Councillor Ryan put forward. That obviously he's wanting to find out the costs of running the Dubbo facility. I just thought what an ideal time to find out the costs of running all 3 facilities at the same time, especially with what's happened in Wellington with the brand new facility set up and understanding how the costs are flowing there in the sense of what it was costing previously with the older facility to now with the newer facility. And obviously with the Geary facility in how we utilise that better and move it forward as well.
Thanks, Councillor Grant. Any other questions or debate on the amendment, councillors? Thanks, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I like Councillor Grant's amendment. I've had a lot of community members approach me with questions about the pools, and that includes Geary specifically, as well as Dubbo, not so much Wellington. But I think it's important, in the interest of transparency and information back to the community, that we get a grasp on all these facilities. There've been lots of changes, not the least of which is the amalgamation and the upgrade to the Wellington pool. So I think if we've got a very clear and concise body of information out there, it will be very beneficial to the community.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any other questions or debate, councillors, on Councillor Grant's amendment? I'll just speak to it briefly and speak to the entire issue as well. I certainly support the motion, and the pool's a very important part of council business and a big ticket expenditure item that we undertake on behalf of the community. And we have made very significant changes a number of years ago to the management of the Dubbo pool. And frankly, I would like to know whether in retrospect that was the right or the wrong decision, in terms of the numbers at least. And I think getting this report on the expenditure that has been undertaken will give us and also the community a good insight into expenditure annually on the pool, and good insight into the effect of that very significant change that we made a number of years back in relation to the management of the pool. So that's another important reason to do this, I think. Any other questions or debate on the amendment? I'll put the amendment then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to the motion as amended. Any further questions or debate, councillors? No, I think it's all been said. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to item 212, 2021 local government election referendum. Councillor Etheridge, would you like to move your notice of motion in relation to the referendum at the local government election?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I would. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Have we got a seconder for Councillor Etheridge's motion? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. And before we do that, I'd like to move an amendment to it, which is to propose the question to be put to the electors at the referendum if the motion is ultimately passed. So I'll move this amendment, that the following question be put to Dubbo Regional Council electors as a referendum. Currently, Dubbo Regional Council is divided into 5 wards that elect 10 councillors in total. Do you favour abolishing this ward system in favour of a single area consisting of voters that elects 11 councillors? That's point 1 of the amendment. Point 2 of the amendment is that the Chief Executive Officer be requested to take the necessary action to engage the New South Wales Electoral Commission to conduct a constitutional referendum on behalf of Council at the December 2021 ordinary local government election, addressing the above-mentioned question. I think people are probably going to want to speak to the amendment and the motion in one go, so why don't we move to that. Councillor Etheridge, would you like to speak on the amendment? And you can, of course, just speak globally.
I fully support the amendment, Mr Mayor. I'm moving this motion to hold a referee on abolishing the ward system, because the ward system has quite simply been a disaster. Our local government areas in a small community, a population of around 50,000, this means we will always have a fairly small number of people standing for council. By splitting us into 5 wards, we don't offer proper choice for everyone. In some wards last time, there was, in reality, no competition at all. The ward system simply doesn't suit this community. That is why it was so confusing and unpopular at the last election. I hope councillors will support this motion to give people that choice. Another problem with the ward system is it's undemocratic. It allows groups to game the system. You can have a group win one way more spots than proportion of the votes justified by running a very ward and getting a quota of votes. Their candidates would never have got if every voter had a proper choice of candidates. That is the reality. I know the Wellington councillors are concerned about the loss of a guarantee of 2 spots for Wellington ward. I believe that worry is not justified. Wellington has more than enough votes to get 2 or more councillors into an 11-person council. I believe this is one of the most important votes we will take in this term of council. And now is the right time to do it with a council election coming up. It gives us the perfect opportunity to incorporate that in the people's voting. I hope the councillors will support this motion so we can have a referendum and let the people decide for themselves and bring a bit of democracy back into Dubbo Regional Council.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions or debate on the amendment?
Mr Mayor, we just need a seconder for the amendment. You raised the amendment, but I don't recall us getting a seconder.
Okay, we've got a seconder for that amendment. Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any further questions or debate on the amendment? Thanks, Councillor Jones.
I'll let Councillor Grant go first, if I could.
Certainly. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Look, I respect that this has been put forward, but unfortunately, I don't agree with this motion. From my perspective, I see it as disappointing that we're raising this now. We've basically just gone through a whole term. We've been extended, and now we're raising it at the last minute. We're in COVID. We can't have proper discussions. We haven't reviewed how this is going to work and how this is going to look into the future for I suppose for the whole LGA. So in my perspective, it's disappointing that we've come together as a council. We've gone through the amalgamation process. We've worked hard with our communities to get them to come together, to understand that Wellington and Dubbo can work together. We're one, and it's not just Wellington and Dubbo. It's you know, the communities in between and the outlying villages. That, you know, I suppose from a Wellington's perspective, we have a lot of those villages in our former or in our Wellington ward. So, you know, we speak for them as well. And I suppose once again, it's disappointing that we could lose, depending on how the vote goes here, you know, our guaranteed 2 voices. And when I look around, you look at the Blaney's, for example. Blaney's the smallest town than ours, smaller town than Wellington, and it's got 7 councillors still, 7 voices still speaking for Blaney. Narromine has 9 councillors. Cabonne has 12. And these councils are smaller than our former Wellington council. So for us to potentially, maybe, if we're lucky, get one, potentially, you know, who knows, we may scrape a second into the new regime if it goes that way. Yeah, I just don't see losing our 2 voices is democratic, because our voice has been taken away in that perspective. We are in a unique situation, Wellington and Dubbo. We're a town in our own right for the Wellington itself, the Wellington town. And when you look at a lot of other regional amalgamations, there's none of that have been like us. They've all been one major centre and a smaller little village, couple of thousand people that have adjoined to it. And that's where I'm concerned that we're not taking the right time, process, and not taking the time to go through all the pros and cons of this. Look, it might be the right decision. I'm not saying that it's not the right decision, but at the moment, when we're trying to just jam this through within a couple of weeks, basically, this is what we're doing. Once again, I don't think it's the right time. I understand that the last election, people were confused and didn't know what was going on. It's because it's never happened before. We had 2 council areas amalgamate together. The New South Wales government didn't tell us what it was going to look like afterwards. Said, there you go, put it together and you've got to work it out. And of course you're going to have a bit of confusion on how people are voting and who to vote for, and that's just natural. But we've gone through that process. Let's move on to the next one. And I think people have a better understanding of how this ward system works, and I think moving forward it will work. Other than that, look, from my perspective, councillors, it's the cost as well, the cost and the time that's been spent into this. It's going to, you know, add additional cost to the whole election process. And once again, I just don't see, in the current situation that we're in with COVID and all this stuff, that we should be just pushing this through at this time. But that's all I have to say on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Grant. Any other questions or debate? I think Councillor Jones, you had your hand up.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I cannot support the proposed motion in relation to the referendum. During the public inquiry regarding the amalgamation of Dubbo and Wellington, I was the Mayor of Wellington, and I voiced the community's concerns in relation to representation. And my fellow councillors at the moment will be aware of a lot of the things that I'm going to say now, but I don't believe the community is aware. So I will take my time, if you would give me the time, to explain the situation. Why was the ward system put in place? It was put in place to ensure that the Wellington community had a voice, and that was put in place by the state government. At that time, there were numerous undertakings given to the Wellington community by the previous administrator, the previous mayor, and the previous CEO, such as quarterly council meetings in Wellington and regular community consultative meetings and various other things, none of which exist today. If the wards system is abolished and the number of councillors increased to 11, Wellington may be lucky 1 councillor elected. The total voters in the Dubbo Regional Council area as at August of this year is 37,080. Of this number, 30,240 are currently in the Dubbo wards. Only 6,840 currently are in the Wellington ward. Take out the voters from Wongarbin, approximately 350, whose community of interest is Dubbo, and that leaves 6,490 for the Wellington ward. Approximately 85% of the total enrolled in the 2017 elections were formal votes. This would bring the estimated formal votes for Dubbo to 25,704 and Wellington 5,516. The quota to be elected in 2024 would be 31,220 voters over 12, because we need to increase the number to work out what the number is for a quorum, and that's 2,602. How many people in Dubbo currently know they're elected members in Wellington? And how many people in Wellington currently know they're elected members in Dubbo? In the 2024 elections, will the residents of Dubbo and Wellington know the candidates from the whole local government area, or will the Dubbo candidates overshadow any candidates from Wellington? I understand that Dubbo residents want to be able to vote for their candidate of choice, but this will be at the expense of representation in Wellington. If the proposed notice of motion is carried, I will predict now that the outcome will be a minimum of 10 councillors from Dubbo, and subject to preferences flowing the right way, we may in fact get 1 councillor elected representing the Wellington community. Councillors, please do not support this notice of motion. Please give Wellington a fair go and have a voice to represent its diverse rural community. Please do not let it just be a numbers game. Let it be true representation for the whole local government area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. I think Councillor Moore might have had his hand up next. Over to you, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I fully support abolishing the ward system, but I fully support that Wellington should have a voice as well. I think it's totally unfair that those elected representatives that look after Wellington won't be able to have their voice on Wellington issues. They are locals at Wellington. They understand what happens in that town and in those villages, so they need to be represented. I think the same as what Councillor Grant said, there needs to be more discussion. There needs to be more time. Obviously, within the ward system, we know that the naming of the wards is totally out of concept of where the locations are in the wards. So I think more explanation, more decision, more discussion and more time before I can support this.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Any other questions or debate on the amendment?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just through you, I have a question, if that's all right.
Yep.
Just as Dubbo continues to grow, obviously Wellington ward, and I'm probably answering my own question here, is going to take in more of Dubbo. Am I correct in saying that?
Might refer that question if it can be answered in person to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess I'll use the current circumstances where there are 2 wards, the North Ward and the East Ward, that have over 8,000 voters in their wards, and the others have between 6,000 and 7,000. So before the 2024 election, there will have to be a readjustment of the ward boundaries. And if this pattern keeps continuing, yes, the Wellington ward will have to shift to the west to get more population in it.
Thanks, Mr Wood. And I think Parker, did you have your hand up to speak on the amendment?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, certainly appreciate what Councillor Grant and Councillor Jones have had to say, and appreciate that they've acknowledged that combined council has worked very well together. And to me, I cannot recall any decision going against what we had planned or proposed for Wellington during the last 3 years or so. So in Dubbo, we do have a lot of concerned voters who don't like the ward system. I think we have an obligation to consider their views. Now, in terms of fears that Wellington will be neglected, I really don't think that's something that would be evident. We are all in one council, and as Councillor Grant said, we have worked very well together, and I'm sure that would continue. And in terms of what Councillor Moore had to say in terms of confusion, in terms of the actual name of the wards, yeah, I certainly agree with that as well. But as I said earlier, we have an obligation to the voters who don't like it as well, and put it to the test. And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other questions or debate on the amendment, councillors? I'll just speak to the amendment and also to the issue substantially. Look, I'll certainly be supporting the amendment and the motion. A little bit of history is probably relevant here, particularly in terms of what Councillor Moore said about being in favour of abolishing the wards, but also in favour of preserving effectively Wellington representation through a Wellington ward. The reason that we can't do that is that the Local Government Act in New South Wales, which obviously applies to us, says that wards must be of the same size. So we would, I imagine, be very attracted to the idea of having a small Wellington ward, say electing 2 or 3 people, and then a big Dubbo ward electing 8 or 7 under the existing numbers. But unfortunately, we can't do it. And we, in fact, went so far, I think it was in 2018, that Dubbo Regional Council moved a motion at the Local Government New South Wales Conference to get that organisation to support an amendment to the Act whereby councils could have wards of different sizes as long as democratic representation was maintained, i.e. as long as the number of councillors being elected in a particular ward aligned with the amount of population there. So you still preserve the one vote, one value system that's so important. Unfortunately, despite us persuading LG New South Wales annual conference along those lines, when the organisation itself came to make representations to the state government, it was a big no. The state government would not even consider amending the Local Government Act to allow wards of different sizes. So we are stuck, it seems, with the system that we have. In terms of the point that Councillor Grant and Councillor Moore to some extent made about needing more time and so forth, just not convinced that there really are any further issues to think about or discuss or thrash out. I think we've got a question that we propose to put to the electors. It's been approved by, or advice has been given from the Office of Local Government, as well as from the Electoral Commission. It's a lawful question. We've had our one experiment so far with the ward system. We know what the electors, at least in Dubbo, certainly think about it. We know the extent of confusion that it generated. If councillors had specific details to put forward in terms of this need for further thought and consideration of the matter, I would certainly consider those matters, but just not convinced that if we delayed this for another 4 years that we would really be in a different place. I think we'd be in the same place. The fundamental issue that we are confronted by is whether we abolish the wards or not, and I'm just not convinced that more dithering, if I can put it that way, on the issue is going to produce a different result. A recent focus of mine has been the need to encourage and facilitate a diverse range of candidates for council. I think abolishing the ward system will be a step towards that. But let's be frank, there's a lot of other reasons, and Councillor Etheridge has touched upon some of them. In some wards in Dubbo at the last election, the choice of candidates was a joke. It was quite clear in a number of the wards exactly who would be elected. You could tell that well in advance of the election. There was in reality only 2 viable choices. And I don't mean any disrespect in saying that to candidates who stood in any particular wards and got comparatively small votes. I met, I think, every candidate, and I think, frankly, they all would have made good councillors. But they didn't have the backing, they didn't have the experience, they didn't have the resources perhaps, or didn't put them into the election. For various different reasons, in a number of the wards, there was such a scarcity of choice, such a small amount of candidates, that there simply was not adequate choice. Let's be quite upfront about all of this. That meant that people got elected who, in a more competitive election, would not have got elected. What I mean by saying a more competitive election is an election where every voter in Dubbo had the choice of any candidate standing across the entire area. And I think our community thinks that that is their right in a democracy. I think people were affronted by turning up at the ballot box, particularly in some wards, and just having virtually no choice. In a fairly small regional community like ours, even though it is a city, and Evo City no less, we just can't cut our candidate pool into 5 and expect every voter to get a proper choice. That is, in my view, the reality that we need to confront. We need to think about the choice that voters had at the last election and think about whether that was an appropriate service to our community. A ward system in a small area can also particularly advantage groups and lead to unrepresentative outcomes. For example, it's very conceivable in our ward system that a person can get elected on less than 25% of the vote in their ward. It's quite conceivable, and in fact, there's people here tonight, I think, who were elected on numbers less than that in terms of primary votes, and I certainly didn't reach a quota myself. That means that if one is talking about groups, you could have a group win 5 spots, half of the elected representatives on council, through getting 25% of the vote across the LGA. That is the reality that a ward system in a small regional community poses. I don't think that that's acceptable. I don't think it serves our local region to have a council elected in that way, and I think it should be abolished. It might well be that wards work well in the cities where you're talking about a ward that would consist probably of much more than the entire population of our LGA in some instances. Might well be that you get appropriate candidate choice in that sort of environment, but you simply do not in our small regional community. I have carefully considered the issue of Wellington representation, and I thought it was very helpful that Councillor Jones put some numbers into the debate. We're talking about, it would seem, a quota, and this is on the advice of the Electoral Commission, and it's not specific, but I think a quota of somewhere around 2,500 to get elected onto an 11-person council that incorporates the whole LGA. We've got 6,490 voters in the old Wellington Shire. I have no doubt whatsoever that if we move to the ward system at the 2024 election, I think it will be, that we will have 2, if not 3 councillors elected out of that area. Councillor Jones has put up her prediction, so I'll put up my prediction, and maybe we'll have a small wager at some point in the future maybe about that, and we'll see who's going to be right or not. But I think it's very unlikely that when you have almost 20% of the vote, 6,490 voters, in a small concentrated area. So it's very reasonable to assume that all of those voters will probably know the candidates. And I think what we will also see in a circumstance where candidates are competing across the local government area is that candidates who might have run in one ward are going to look at it quite differently and not see themselves as necessarily having the appeal across the area. I think it's likely we'll probably see a bit of a smaller group of candidates from the Wellington area, and they will have the benefit of being well known, I would have thought it's likely, to a very large percentage of the electorate. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that it's likely there'll be one. I reckon it's all but inevitable that there will be two. And I have no doubt if one goes over the primary votes, for example, from the 2012 Dubbo City Council election and considers the quota for this new system, that both councillors, Grant and Jones, would have been elected if we didn't have the ward system at the last election. I've got no doubt about that. Their primary votes were significantly higher than people getting elected, for example, into the last few spots on the old council. So, look, I certainly understand the concerns being put on behalf of Wellington. I understand that we'd be moving away from a guaranteed sort of amount of representation of two councillors. But I think it's a mathematical question. And, you know, from my view, looking at the numbers, there's no doubt that Wellington will continue to be represented. Indeed, it's likely that they would have two and possibly even more councillors. So I don't think that those concerns on balance justify not giving the people the choice to abolish the ward system. So those are my thoughts on it, councillors. Any other questions or debate on the amendment? Thanks, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything so far that's been said on the in support of this amendment. Excuse me. One thing I was very concerned about, and looking at the Wellington side of things, is to ensure that that area gets the best representation it can. Is that Dubbo moves from 10 councillors to 11. Having an even number on any council is ridiculous for all sorts of reasons. By moving to 11, it makes the quotas smaller and it vastly increases the chances of Wellington getting at least two people. So if we were putting a question up for 10 councillors and to get rid of the wards, I would have a major problem supporting that. I have no problem supporting this, and I firmly agree with you. I think there'll almost definitely be at least two people from Wellington. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. I might just speak very briefly in response on the amendment. I didn't mention the question of proposing to move to 11 as the number of councillors to be elected. The reason I think that is a wise thing to do is really twofold. Firstly, it reduces the quota. So it reduces the quota, I'm not exactly sure about the maths, but by around 10%. So it will help to guarantee Wellington representation, I would have thought. But also it will do away with the mayoral casting vote. At the moment, with having 10 councillors, that's an even number. So if the vote is split 5-5, then the mayor has the casting vote. And it's not something that I've been that comfortable with. I think it's not really the democratic system that you normally have. If you can have an odd number, I think it's better. And that's why I certainly support the question being framed in that way. Councillor Etheridge, did you want to speak again? Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. I think you're on mute, Councillor Etheridge.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wellington people are a very close-knit community, and they will vote for their candidates. And with all the numbers that we put around tonight and everything else, I think it would be remiss really if we miss this choice with an election coming up to hear what the people want. Let them guide us. But the Wellington people they're a very close-knit community, and I'm sure that they will always vote for their candidates. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. Any other questions or debate, councillors? I'll put the amendment then. All those in favour? And against? I declare it carried. We'll move then on to the amended motion. Any other contributions, councillors, questions or debate? Thanks, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move a further amendment that this item be deferred until it goes on public display for 28 days so the public can have their say in whether they'd like this referendum and what they'd like in it.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. We've got a seconder for that. Thanks, Councillor Grant. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Moore?
Well, look, I know this council is very much popular on community consultation. We've sort of blocked the public out from having a say. Yes, we've received some emails and so on about the amalgamation and yes, about disbanding the ward system, but the majority of the electorate have not had a say in what they'd like with inside the ward system. As I said, the naming of the wards has been a huge problem, but also there'd be lots of people in Wellington overly concerned about losing their representation. I think we need to get submissions off the public. The public need to have their voice being heard by this council that has been very popular in community consultation, and I think we owe it to them.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor Ryan, do you want to speak on Councillor Moore's amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I definitely won't be supporting that proposed amendment. And the reason I won't is we are giving the entire community the absolute 100% consultation of letting them decide. So we don't need any extra consultation or to hold this up anymore. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Grant, do you want to speak to Councillor Moore's amendment?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say Councillor Diffie was before me, but...
Sorry, Councillor Diffie. Thanks, I didn't see that.
No, that's all right. I was just going to actually I think Councillor Ryan actually said it, but just point out that this is going to community consultation. It's a referendum. It's asking a question.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie and Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. And look, I've just, Councillor Moore has obviously thrown that in a mix, so I certainly support that. Obviously, anything that we can do to look at how we can bring the community with us. This is what we need to be looking at. With the amalgamation, probably wasn't done the best. We didn't bring the communities together properly. You know, it wasn't a worked process, but this is something we can do together with the communities, bring the community with us, talk to them through it, tell them how it's going to look. Look, as I said, it could be the right decision, but at the moment, if we just rush it through, I don't think it is the right decision. And I think we need to bring the communities with us and explain how it's going to look, explain how it works, explain that, you know, yes, show the figures. Let's have a look at the figures and see how it would work for Wellington. And, you know, there's a good chance that you could get the community to come with you. But once again, we're just, I suppose, shutting people out and shutting Wellington out on this. And I feel that it's just disappointing that we're going that way. And from my perspective, it's nearly the takeover's complete. Like, that's from my perspective, and it's really disappointing that we've had to go down that avenue without the proper consultation and bringing the community with us. But thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Grant. Councillor Jones, do you want to speak on Councillor Moore's amendment?
Yes, look, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to say that everything that Councillor Grant and Councillor Moore has said is right. The amalgamation was not done properly with community consultation. If we go to a referendum, it'll be done and dusted without the people actually understanding what it means. I really don't think that we should be doing this, and I agree with Councillor Moore in relation to community consultation. If they say yes, they want to go to a referendum, let's go. But if they say no, then we shouldn't go.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any other questions or debate? I'll just speak briefly to the amendment. The only real circumstance where you would have extensive community consultation on a referendum question, in my view, would be if there was some genuine dispute about the terms of the question. So, for example, it's not unheard of at the Commonwealth level when they have referendums to amend the Constitution to have consultation, because there'll be quite significant implications about the wording of the question. But there's no such issue here. So the suggestion that you would consult on the question for 28 days is just a way of derailing the proposal in reality. And we also have strict timelines. So to do that would mean that we would breach that timeline and we actually couldn't have the referendum. But all of that said, if I thought there was reason to consult on the question, then I would absolutely support it. But there's not. It's just a distraction. And as Councillor Diffie said, we are going to consult. It's called every single elector at the election having a piece of paper put in front of them to say yes or no.
Yeah.
There is no form of consultation superior to that in our system. And frankly, I mean, the suggestion that we would go out, undertake some form of community consultation, whether that's standing at the markets or putting up a Facebook post or reaching out to community groups, see what people think about this, and then somehow reach a decision that we would not do it, that we would not give the people the choice on the basis that some small percentage of the community has responded to consultation. That's not a viable approach in my view. We are proposing the most superior form of consultation. It's called an election referendum, and we should push on and do it. Any further questions or debate on Councillor Moore's amendment? I'll put that then. All those in favour of the amendment? And all those against? I declare it lost. That brings us to Councillor Etheridge's motion as amended. Any further questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour? And against? I declare it carried. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I have my name noted against that?
Certainly, Councillor Grant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And could I also too, please, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly, thank you. Okay, that is the last of the notices of motion. We then move to reports from staff. First one is item 213, draft council policy, councillor and staff interaction, results of public exhibition. Can I please have someone move the report of the CEO? Thanks, Councillor Diffie, seconded by Councillor Ryan. Any questions or debate, councillors? No, all those in favour? And against? I declare it carried. That brings us to item 214, disclosure of interest returns. Can I please have someone move the report of the Executive Manager, Governance and Internal Control? Thanks, Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Grant. Any questions or debate, councillors? I'll put it then. All those in favour? And against? I declare it carried. That brings us to item 215, independent investigation findings. Councillor Moore, do you have a declaration in respect of this one?
Mr. Mayor, you need a mover and a seconder first.
Oh, yeah. We've got a mover for that, Councillor Grant, and a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Moore, do you have a declaration to make?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a non-pecuniary significant interest in this matter. I wish to declare that a non-pecuniary significant interest in this matter, and as I have been advised by my legal representatives that due to me reporting significant issues in regards to the processes and handling of this report to ICAC, I should have no further input in this matter. So, and I will leave the meeting.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Moore is gone. We've got a mover and a seconder. Any questions or debate on this one, councillors? I'll just speak to it then. So the situation in relation to the independent investigator report tonight is that we are not yet, as councillors know, in a position to release the report. We certainly hope to be soon, but the matter will unfortunately have to come back to council next month. As councillors are aware, we had some briefings where legal issues and legal advice was discussed to council. The situation now is that we have submitted a proposal to the Office of Local Government to approve our proposal to release a redacted copy of the report, and we certainly hope that the Office of Local Government looks in a favourable way on our proposal, but it is important that we just tick off that last box in terms of the proposed release of the amended copy of the report, a report that I should say is of immense community interest in our region and relates to really very important matters. I might just say a few things about certain of the legal issues that council has been considering. I think the community is well entitled to hear councillors speak about them and to gain more understanding of the issues that we are considering. The legal issues that have delayed the releasing of the report relate in many ways to the legal issues that govern the purpose and scope of the investigation. As I noted when this matter was last before council, we commissioned this investigation in the context of widespread community concern about the integrity of our code of conduct processes. There was a high degree of concern in the community that people's complaints about the conduct of councillors, or the alleged conduct, I should say, of councillors were not being handled properly. That people weren't getting a fair go and a fair hearing when they wanted to make a complaint of misconduct. As part of preparing for this meeting, I in fact reviewed the public statements that were made by myself and others prior to the obtaining of the investigation report, including things that were said in council meetings, but also things that were said by our local MP, for example, and others. I must say I was struck by how accurate our concerns turned out to be. Despite the confidentiality of code of conduct matters, which meant that councillors don't know a thing about a code of conduct matter until it's found proven, in essence, by an independent investigator, and then is brought to council for council to make a decision on the recommendation. Despite that, we had a very strong sense, I certainly did, if you look back at my public statements, about the community concern about the integrity of our code of conduct processes. It's a testament, I suppose, to the correctness of rumours sometimes. Perhaps it's also a testament to just how serious the issues were. There was widespread concern about lack of due process, lack of accountability, quite simply that code of conduct complaints were being mishandled. There was also, of course, related concern about councillor conduct, the underlying allegations that people had made, which these community rumours and concerns were that the process had miscarried in respect of those complaints. So we sought advice on both issues, or two issues. Could we as a council review the handling of code of conduct matters over the term of council? But we also, I'll be frank, sought advice on whether we could have a special investigation into councillor wrongdoing. So could we bring someone in to go through all the allegations, see who did the wrong thing and who didn't do the wrong thing? But the legal advice that came back was clear. In fact, it was crystal clear. Yes to the first matter, we could look at the handling and processing of code of conduct complaints. We could get an investigator to look at whether the right process was followed. But the advice was very clear on the second matter. No, we could not hire an independent investigator to look into allegations of wrongdoing against councillors. Simply was not allowed, was not the purpose of the independent investigator. Now, what that means is that anyone who claims to have been cleared by the findings of the independent investigator in terms of code of conduct complaints and the like is lying, because that was not the purpose of the independent investigator. We couldn't rehash old allegations that might have been mishandled. And look, I'll be frank, in many ways that was a disappointing outcome. I would have very much liked an investigation that looked into any and all allegations of wrongdoing, and I'm sure I speak for many of the councillors here. So we had this independent investigation, and I previously said in council that the findings were extremely serious. Systemic mishandling of complaints, including serious allegations of breaches of the code. So one of the main issues that our legal advisors have looked at was the operation of a number of provisions of the procedures code for code of conducts. So there's two council policies that apply when a person makes a code of conduct complaint. There's the code of conduct itself, which sets out the rules. So that says that you can't sexually harass people, you can't bully people, you can't abuse your power, etc., etc. All of those rules of behaviour that the community won't be surprised to hear that apply to councillors. But there's also the procedures code. So there's a separate council policy, which also has the force of state law, that sets out how code of conduct complaints will be handled. And that's what creates this process of independent assessment, referral of allegations that could be a breach to an independent external assessor. Now, part 12 of the second policy, that's the policy for the procedures of handling of code of conduct, states a number of things, but it says this: information about code of conduct complaints and the management and investigation of code of conduct complaints is to be treated as confidential and not to be publicly disclosed. So one of the issues that we have been grappling with is whether the release of the report in any way might infringe any of the provisions in Part 12. And look, the advice that we've got is encouraging, but it certainly means that the report has to be redacted or amended to make sure that we're not disclosing through the release of the independent investigator report things that relate to individual complaints. For example, the identity of people who've made complaints, the subject matter of the complaint even, or even, for example, the name of the person who was complained against. To release any of that stuff would infringe Part 12 of the procedures policy. I understand the desire in the community to see the report released, and I don't think there's anyone in the community who wants it released more than me. I probably speak for other councillors in saying that. I think the community is entitled to get a thorough understanding of how and why our code of conduct process has failed. However, as I've said, the report was concerned with process, not the underlying merit or substance of the allegations. So the unfortunate reality is ultimately the release of this report, which I think will happen, is not going to answer all of the questions that the report has thrown up. It's not going to answer all of the questions that the community has about this situation that we have confronted. And I, as a lawyer, I suppose I think about this like a lawyer, but I suspect there's a bit of common sense in that as well. If I look at a situation of alleged wrongdoing as a lawyer, I always ask a few questions. I want to look at what has been done wrong. I want to understand why the wrongdoing occurred. And if it's unclear whether it's actually occurred or not, so when you're talking about an allegation, I'm often interested in knowing who received a benefit from it. Who received a benefit from a particular decision being made. Obviously want to know who made the decision. And if you're looking at an allegation or a suggestion of wrongdoing, you might want to understand the relationship between the various people involved. All of those questions arise here, but they won't be answered by the release of the report. Because as I've said, the report was concerned with process. I think the community is going to understandably want to know who were the allegations against that the processing of which was mishandled. I think the community is going to want to know what were the allegations. I think the community is going to want to know whether councillors or former councillors have escaped accountability and scrutiny for misconduct. But sadly, those questions won't be answered by the release of the report. Only a thorough public inquiry in a body with appropriate powers will shed light on all of those questions. And I strongly believe that such an inquiry should occur. So with all of that said, I look forward hopefully to the Office of Local Government approving our proposal to release the report. They indicated to us last week that they need more time to consider the matter. So I look forward to this matter coming back to Council in October, and hopefully a redacted copy of the report being released. If we get the advice from OLG a reasonable time prior to that meeting, then it's certainly my intention to convene an extraordinary council meeting to release a redacted copy of the report so the community can get at least some of the answers that the community is entitled to when one considers that what we're dealing with here is the derailing, the subversion, the mismanagement of our code of conduct process. And it is our code of conduct as elected representatives that makes us accountable to the community for wrongdoing. So it's an incredibly serious matter. The findings of this report, and I've said that previously, community is entitled to get a fuller understanding of it. That's the things that I wanted to say on this matter. Any other questions or debate, councillors? Thanks, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like the community to know that there is an enormous amount I would like to say on this matter, but I don't have the benefit of your legal training. And even with your legal training, you are incredibly constrained with what you can say. But I would like the community to know I fully support any and all investigations that will get to the bottom of all the things that are troubling all the councillors you can see on this feed. It's incredibly concerning, some of the allegations, and people have a right to know. And I will be doing everything I can to keep pushing for as much disclosure and as much investigation as we can possibly get. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any other questions or debate, councillors? I'll put that then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. We'll get Councillor Moore back in. Thank you. And I think Councillor Moore is back now. Can you hear us, Councillor Moore?
Sure can.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. That brings us to item 216, Local Government New South Wales Board Elections and Annual Conference. Can I please have someone move the report of the Governance Team Leader? Thanks, Councillor Diffie, and seconded by Councillor Grant. And I think we have an alternate motion or an amendment, is that right? Councillor Parker, can you please read that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I have an alternate motion to CCL 21216. First item being that Councillors Diffie, Etheridge, Lawrence and Parker be nominated with voting delegates for voting on standing orders and the Treasurer's report at the 2021 LG NSW Annual Conference to be held on the 29th of November 2021. Item 2, that Councillors Diffie, Etheridge, Lawrence and Parker be the nominated voting delegates for the LG NSW Board elections. And item 3, that Council advise Local Government New South Wales, LG NSW in brackets, the details of its nominated voting delegates for both the LG NSW Annual Conference and the LG NSW Board election by 12 noon on the 5th of October 2021.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Is anyone else hearing a loud noise? Or is that just me? I think it might have.
Yeah. Sorry, we were just trying to figure out what it was. We don't know.
thought it was my fire alarm, but I don't think it was. Anyway, it stopped. We'll assume we're okay. We've got a seconder for Councillor Parker's amendment. Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. Questions or debate, councillors, on this? No. Okay, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to the next agenda item, reinstating the COVID-19 rates financial assistance policy. Can I please have someone move the report of the Chief Financial Officer? Thanks, Councillor Parker. Seconded, Councillor Moore. Any questions or debate, councillors? Thanks, Councillor Parker.
Oh, look here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This year's lockdown, to me and a lot of other people within the community, I think it's a fair bit of hurt this time around, probably a bit more so than what we experienced last year. So I would just like to put it through you to the director as to what the council's approach might be, and has there been much activity in that particular area? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. I might put that question through the CEO to Mr. Dean Frost.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have had some inquiries to our customer experience counter in relation to what opportunities are available for people in relation to rates. Last year we had about 60 ratepayers avail themselves to the opportunity to delay the payment of their rates and to avoid the interest that typically occurs on rates arrears. Essentially, this is what we're proposing to do this year's is the same arrangements. And I think that it's really important, though, for us to be working with the ratepayers to have them really understand that this is not abolishing the rates for this year. It is really a way of them just avoiding the any interest that may accrue on rates arrears, and for us to work with them to get a payment plan that will enable them to get to the start of next financial year with a clean slate. Now, we're quite happy to engage in a whole range of flexible ways of doing that with the ratepayers, recognising that everyone's got an individual and particular circumstance. But the last thing we want to do is to have people get to the end of next financial year or this current financial year, and then we apply another round of rates, and they've sort of doubled down on their situation. So our finance staff will work very, very closely with anybody who makes that application. If the council resolves in accordance with our recommendation tonight, we will have some things available on the website tomorrow for people to make those applications. And as I said, our staff will be available to work their way through that with anybody who thinks that they should need that support.
Thanks, Mr. Frost. Any further questions or debate, councillors? I think Councillor Parker's back. Any further questions or debate, councillors? Does that answer your question, Councillor Parker?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's encouraging, and I hope all the community understand what's going on there, and certainly if there's any problems, they come forward. But, thanks very much for that.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Yeah, look, I certainly support this policy being reintroduced. There wasn't a huge amount of applicants under the policy, the same policy that we introduced early last year after the outset of the pandemic and the lockdown and so forth, but it was obviously important for those people who did access it. And we're very significantly back in the same place, so entirely appropriate to give people that opportunity for interest-free deferment and so forth. So, yeah, certainly support that. Any further questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. That brings us to item 218, Event Assistance Program 2021-2022, Round 1, Community Events Fund and Emerging Events Fund. Can I please have someone move the report of the Manager Regional Events? Thanks, Councillor Parker. Seconded, Councillor Ryan. Any questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried. Next item is 219, the proposed road closure at Campania Road at Rawsonville. Can I please have someone move the report of the road services engineer? Moved by Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Etheridge. Councillor Diffie, would you like to declare an interest?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest in the matter of my husband, Tom and Kath Harvey. I will not be present at or in the site of the meeting at the time the matter is discussed, considered or voted on.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. We'll just wait for Councillor Diffie to disappear. Questions or debate, councillors? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour and against? I declare it carried. And we'll get Councillor Diffie back and we'll move on to item 220. Thanks, Councillor Diffie. Can you hear us? Very good. That brings us to item 220, proposed closure of unformed road, section of Gnu Street at Wongarvan. Can I please have someone move the report of the road services engineer? Thanks, Councillor Jones. Seconded, Councillor Etheridge. Councillor Moore, did you have a declaration?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary less than significant interest in this matter, as my residence is located across the road from the proposed closure of Gnu Street, but I'll be staying in the room.
Certainly. Thanks, Councillor Moore. That's noted. Questions or debate, councillors? I'll put that then. All those in favour and against? Declare it carried. That brings us then to item 221, to comments and matters of urgency. Might start with Councillor Moore, who's immediately to my right on the screen at the bottom.
I've got nothing, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Moore, and I'll move up to Councillor Ryan.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And up to Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to quickly just put it out there for the people of Wellington at the moment. There is a bit of a surge in COVID cases, as you probably are aware, Mr. Mayor, and you probably know a bit more than myself. But I just really want to encourage people to stay home, get tested, look, go out as minimal as possible. Let's just try to stem this issue, get it sorted, and just encourage people to stay home as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Grant. And over to Councillor Diffie.
Nothing from me, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. And over to Councillor Jones. You're on mute, Councillor Jones. I'm sorry. There's always one. You're on mute. Just amazing has happened so late in the meeting. Thanks, I think you're off mute now, Councillor Jones.
Finally. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to support everything that Councillor Grant has said in relation to the Wellington community. Please go and get vaccinated. Go and do your testing. Stay at home. Don't go visiting anyone. Please, it's all up to you to ensure that our community gets out of this and that we don't have any further deaths within our local government area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. And Councillor Etheridge. You're also on mute, Councillor Etheridge.
Heaven's sake. No, I'm fine, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Etheridge. And Councillor Parker.
No, nothing, Mr. Mayor. I'm just, I guess, looking forward to the NRL game next year again. So, particularly with Panthers and what do you call it, the Rabbits. So, obviously, the results of the last weekend and next weekend will have a lot of bearing on it. But certainly looking forward to that. But other than that, nothing else to talk about. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Just a couple of things from me. Yeah, I also want to acknowledge the situation in Wellington with a really alarming number of COVID cases. Really concerning, the numbers, particularly for such a small community. I have had a range of information about this throughout the course of the day, and suffice to say, I know the authorities and other people on the emergency committee are really, really concerned about this. It has meant that the Wellington pool is not going to reopen on schedule, unfortunately. So yeah, really, I want to issue that shout out to members of the Wellington community to take this extremely seriously, to stay at home, but also to do all you can to influence those who do find it hard to comply with the public health orders, to encourage them to comply as well. You know, people in families, maybe often young people out there, those people who do find it hard to comply, really, I think, effective for members of their family, their extended family, and their community to reach out to them. Also want to, again, acknowledge the incredible effort across the LGA in complying with lockdown. We certainly haven't seen the end of the outbreak. We are still dealing with it, but some encouraging signs in the Dubbo region, particularly in terms of a drop in cases, and that is a testament to the hard work of the community. But there's just no room for complacency here, because we know that testing levels are low. We know that the daily statistics released probably don't accurately reflect the community transmission occurring. So just because you see 0 cases one day in Dubbo, it does not mean the virus has not infected people in Dubbo that day. It simply means that a positive case has not been detected in the number of people that have gone and got tested. Just lastly, I want to acknowledge the death last Thursday of Sir Robert Woods, who many people, particularly in the Wellington area, will know and remember fondly. Sir Robert had an incredible life, and I won't attempt to give any form of obituary here, because I'm simply not the right person to do it. But I knew him fairly well after arriving in Dubbo myself in 2010 when he was the District Court judge sitting here. And I don't think you'd meet anyone who spent any time in his court who would doubt the kindness and compassion and basic humility of the man. He always strove to do justice in the cases before him, and he always recognised the essential humanity of those coming before him, even though in many cases, obviously sitting predominantly in criminal matters, he was dealing with pretty hardened people that had often been involved in pretty bad conduct. But he always saw the humanity. He punished when he had to, but yeah, he always saw the humanity. Had a really, really incredible life. He was a Supreme Court Justice in PNG, one of those people that served pre-independence, I believe, and then stayed on in independent PNG to serve the people there in the judicial system. And then after his retirement from that, served on the District Court, I think for about 10 or 11 years in New South Wales before he retired in 2011. He had a vineyard at his home in Wellington, I believe. That was something very dear to him. He was a very active member of the Church of England and sat on the Synod, I think it might be called, I could be wrong about that, of the Church of England based in Bathurst, and offered his judicial and legal skills in that context. A great singer, I've been told, very active in choirs, I think, as part of the church. So really a Renaissance man, and a man loved by a lot of people, and someone that is going to be fondly remembered by many people as word of his death spread. So I just wanted to say those things about the life of Sir Robert Woods. If there's nothing further, councillors, can I have someone, we'll move to item 222, Committee of the Whole. Can I have someone move us into Committee of the Whole to deal with confidential items? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. We've got a seconder for that. Thanks, Councillor Parker. The time being 7:12 p.m. As we're moving into confidential Committee of the Whole, I'll put that, I should say. All those in favour of moving to Committee of the Whole and against, I declare it carried. As we're moving into confidential Committee of the Whole, live web streaming will now be paused, and web streaming will resume once we move back into the open session of the meeting for the resolutions to be heard. Thanks. Please stop the web streaming. Okay, thanks everyone. We're now back into the ordinary council meeting, having conducted our committee of the whole. I'll now ask the executive manager, governance and internal control, to read the report of committee of the whole.
Item CW 21/17, Transport New South Wales lease and acquisition of council-owned land and controlled land for River Street Bridge project. 1, that the report of the Manager, Property and Land Development dated 14 September be noted. 2, that council agree to Transport New South Wales acquisitions of the following council-owned properties. A, the whole of lot 100 on DP 261729. B, part of lot 1 on DP 250606. C, part of lot 2 on DP 250606. D, part of lot 2 on DP 1114367. E, part of lot 4 on DP 1114367. And F, part of lot 1 on DP 1039425, on the basis that compensation calculated in accordance with the Land Acquisition Just Terms Compensation Act 1991 will be paid by Transport New South Wales for such acquisitions. 3, that council agree to Transport New South Wales acquisition of council-controlled Lot 2 on DP 1039425 on the basis that compensation calculated in accordance with the Land Acquisition Just Terms Compensation Act 1991 will be paid by Transport New South Wales for such acquisition. 4, that council agree to lease to Transport New South Wales A, part of Lot 2 on DP 958250 and B, part of Lot 2 on DP 250606 on the basis that Transport New South Wales will pay fair rent for the leased areas. 5, that the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to negotiate and finalise all matters relating to this report, including A, the areas to be acquired by Transport New South Wales, B, the areas to be leased by Transport New South Wales, and C, the amount of compensation and rent to be paid to council. 6, that all documentation in relation to this matter be executed by the Chief Executive Officer under power of attorney. 7, that the considerations in relation to this matter remain confidential to council. Item CW 21/18, Cost Recovery Agreement, Moffat Estate Stage 3. 1, that the information contained in the report by the Property Development Officer dated 13 September 2021 be noted. 2, that the cost recovery agreement outlined in this report be adopted. 3, that the Chief Executive Officer be delegated authority to finalise the cost recovery agreement. 4, that all documents in relation to this matter be executed under power of attorney. 5, that the information and considerations in regard to this matter remain confidential to council. Item CW 21/19, Dubbo Public Library Draft Community Needs Assessment and Feasibility Study. 1, that a community and stakeholder engagement program related to Dubbo Public Library locality and planning be rolled out during February 2022. 2, that a final report related to Dubbo Public Library research and consultation be tabled at the April 2022 Ordinary Council meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Roust. Can I have someone move that report, save and accept the first item in relation to the River Street Bridge project? We've got a mover for that. Thanks, Councillor Parker. Seconded by Councillor Ryan. Questions or debate on that, councillors? All those in favour and against? I declare it carried. We'll then have someone move the report in relation to the River Street Bridge item. We've got a mover for that. Yep, we've got a mover for that item. Thanks, Councillor Parker. We've got a seconder. We've got a seconder for that. Thanks, Councillor Grant. And Councillor Diffie, I think you'll need to declare your interest again, will you?
Yes, I declare a non-pecuniary but significant interest as I'm employed by New South Wales Parliament as the Senior Electorate Officer for the State Member Dougal Saunders. I will not be present at or inside of the meeting at the time the matter is discussed, considered or voted on, sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Diffie. Questions or debate, councillors? I'm noting the report of committee of the whole. No. All those in favour and against, I declare it carried, and we'll get Councillor Diffie back in. Thanks, Councillor Diffie. Can you hear us? Very good. There's no further items for consideration of the ordinary council meeting, and I declare the meeting closed, the time being 21 minutes past the hour of 7. Web streaming has now been completed. I thank everyone for their attendance. Please stop the web streaming.